You did some research into money, I think, when you were coming around to finally understand this. And I think you did go back to 5,500 years. You looked at gold, you looked at ledgers, and then you looked at the dollar and you looked at what happened post-pandemic and you said, okay, now I really see this disconnect. Can you explain some of the things that you learned and then talk about the dollar? You know, I had my 17-year-old daughter, Gabriella, in here 2 weeks ago, and we had a conversation that we were having at home. And she didn't own any crypto, and she was saying, how can they keep printing money, and asking all of these amazing questions that, you know, only a teenager or a kid would ask, that we all should be asking. Tell me your view on money after you did that research.
Well, I mean, I'll say a couple of broad things first, you know, and I would recommend Professor Ferguson's book, The Ascent of Money, Neil Ferguson. You could also watch the PBS documentary that's available in most places now, which just describes what money has actually been to civilization. And so, not to bore people, but all it is a technology. It's a tool that we're using in exchange instead of bartering with each other. And so we use seashells, wampum, grain. We had gold coins or silver coins stamped with Roman emperors' profiles on them, or the leader of the day. And we've had that constant transference into that technology of what we perceive to be value. But one axiomatic fact of money, it's never worth what the goods and services are that we're trading for. You know, I have a piece of fabric. It's not paper money. It's actually made out of cotton and linen, at least in the United States. And that piece of fabric painted green, just a piece of paper, but yet it has symbols on it, and it's a totem that we trust with each other. So the second axiomatic fact is it has to be a trusted network. I have a $100 bill. I can go to the pizzeria with that piece of fabric. They'll take it from me because they know they can give it to another person who will accept that fabric for goods and services, or for the labor to make the pizza, and so on and so forth. Or think about it electronically. If I like a G-Wagon and I want to wire electronically money from my ledger, it electronically spits out to the other person's bank account, the Mercedes-Benz dealership. 200,000 of those later, the G-Wagon shows up in my driveway. What are those things worth? They're just electronic bits. But what Professor Ferguson would say is they're a network. They're a trusted network. And we trust it, and it's been based on and backed by the government, and so therefore we trust it. And so what has happened, unfortunately, throughout history is that the money gets corrupted, because what governments have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to create more volume of it, and the volume will actually solve short-term solutions, or the volume will actually induce more exports. You know, you may remember from your 11th grade European history course on mercantilism. You know, if you're lowering your currency or devaluing your currency, you can send exports through the roof. And so John Maynard Keynes in 1944, when they sat at Bretton Woods and they were resetting the currency table and they were resetting the idea of global trade, Professor Keynes actually wanted a single currency. All the other industrial nations pushed back, but his point was a single currency will keep us all honest. We won't be able to manipulate our respective currencies, and it'll help global trade, but more importantly, it'll help middle and lower middle income people. Because you said that the bank is a part of our life, but you know what's also become part of our life, Brian, is the central bank. Anybody that owns dollar-denominated assets or pound-denominated assets has been taxed by their neighborly central banker, because they've produced so much more money over the last 13 years. Let's just go over the last year. In the United States, the M2 supply of money, the supply of dollars, has increased 37% since April of 2020. In the first 5 months of 2021, we electronically created $469 billion. So we have more money in the system now, sloshing around in the system. So whether you like it or not, you got taxed. Because if you have $10,000 in your bank account, well, it only has $9,200 worth of purchasing power today relative to what it had a year ago. And so we have to understand that, and that's stealing our time, that's stealing our energy. Now, if we own assets, we're well protected. You know, Calvin Klein, the fashion designer, bought his Hamptons real estate waterfront property for $3.6 million in 1987. He sold it last month for 85 million fiat dollars. And so we crushed that currency. And so what happened to us is we had very good wages, aspirational living standards for America's middle class and the middle class in Western civilization. But 50 short years ago, in August of 1971, August 15th, Richard Nixon said, we can't pay back our deficits. People want our gold. The dollar was tied to gold. It was $35 per ounce of gold. And so what Richard Nixon said is that we can't do that anymore. So we're just going to let our currency float freely. And it had this huge disruptive effect in global commerce. It caused massive inflation in the 1970s. Inflation was subsequently tamed by our Federal Reserve and emerging technologies that brought down prices, but it corrupted the money. And so let's just go through the math. $35 an ounce in 1971, it's $1,700 an ounce today. We took our money down about 98%. So to put it in real world terms, 2 American dollars has the purchasing power of 100 American dollars today. And that is damaging. It's damaging to the middle class. It's damaging to the lower middle class. It may help us in the short term, but it has very long-term deleterious side effects. And so in comes Satoshi Nakamoto, or the group known as Satoshi Nakamoto. We started this process aggressively in the 2008 financial crisis. He said, well, listen, if we're going to corrupt the money like this, we have to use our technology to create money that can actually offer a standard for the world or some type of stability to long-term value. And he basically said, if you understand what I'm saying, then you'll recognize that we can create this ledger through mathematical properties. And if I'm right and people start to accept it, well, then the coin, the Bitcoin or that currency will start to rise in value because it'll start to make sense that will be the currency that we use in terms of the transfer of goods and services. So listen, if you looked at it in 2009, so okay, that's hard to believe. It's worthless. It's just an electronic cryptograph. If you looked at it in 2014, you say, whoa, people are adopting it. They're starting to recognize that it could be real. And then, of course, last year when it got to 100 million users, I turned to my team and said, that's escape velocity for me. Now, the good news for everybody listening, we are still early. The best time to have bought Bitcoin was 11 years ago. The second best time to buy Bitcoin is right now. Okay, so we're incredibly early. We only have a 2.5% saturation in the world. There's about 180 million wallets for Bitcoin today. If Kathy Wood is correct, it'll go to 1 billion wallets by the end of 2025. I believe that's the case. And if that's the case, given the scarcity of Bitcoin, these coins will be worth several $100,000 a coin. And I think it's important for people to have some of them in their portfolio. Now, of course, if I'm 100% wrong, I tell clients, let's have a small piece. If I'm right, you're going to be well rewarded. And if I'm wrong, it won't be enough to hurt you. But I think we're going that way. So you have 2 things happening at once: an improvement in our currency through technology and a destruction of the old system born from the capricious nature of our policymakers and our politicians. So those simultaneous interactions are creating a ripe environment for this type of technology to emerge.